I never imagined my husband's sister's wedding would turn into the worst day of my life. For years, she had been obsessed with my expensive ring, the last gift my late mother ever gave me. On the day of her wedding, she convinced my husband that she deserved to wear it. The moment we arrived at the venue and stepped out into the parking lot, my husband demanded that I hand it over to her sister. When I refused, her face twisted with anger. Without warning, he kicked my pregnant belly. Pain exploded through my body. I crashed into the open car door and fell onto the pavement. Seconds later, my water broke. Terrified and bleeding, I pulled out my phone and called the only person I could think of: my father. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. The moment my father stepped out, my husband's face went pale. My sister-in-law stopped talking, and the entire wedding party fell silent, because they had just realized whose daughter they had hurt. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? My name is Elena Vance Miller, though for the last 4 years, everyone in my life has only known me as Elena Miller. If you met me a week ago, you would have seen a quiet, fiercely loyal graphic designer who lived a completely modest, ordinary life. I wore thrifted clothes, I worked 60 hours a week, hunched over a laptop until my eyes ached, and I lived in a cramped, drafty 2-bedroom apartment. I did all of it out of love. I did all of it because I believed in a future built from scratch. But what no one around me knew, not my neighbors, not my coworkers, and certainly not my husband's toxic family, was that my modest life was entirely a choice. I am the sole heiress to Arthur Vance, the billionaire founder and CEO of Vance Global Enterprises. 7 years ago, I was a different person. I grew up in a world of private jets, sprawling estates, and endless security details. But then I met David Miller. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed completely enamored by me. When I brought him home, my father, a hyper-perceptive, powerful man who built an empire from nothing, saw straight through David's polished exterior. He told me David was a parasite, an ambitious social climber who only loved the dollar signs attached to my last name. We had a catastrophic argument. My father gave me an ultimatum: leave David or walk away from the Vance family fortune with absolutely nothing. Driven by romantic idealism and a desperate need to prove my father wrong, I chose David. I packed a single suitcase, legally dropped Vance from my name, and cut all ties with my father. I chose to prove that our love was real, that we didn't need a billionaire's backing to build a beautiful life. When I left, I only took one valuable thing with me. It wasn't money. It was a flawless, custom-cut, 4-carat sapphire ring. It was the very last gift my mother gave me on her deathbed before she passed away. To the untrained eye, it was just a beautiful piece of jewelry, but it was valued at $150,000. More importantly, it carried every single memory of my mother's voice, her warmth, and her love. It was my anchor. For 7 years, I kept that ring locked safely away in a small velvet box, never wearing it, never flaunting it. I wanted to keep it pure, separate from the grueling financial struggles David and I faced. But secrecy breeds assumptions, and the Miller family assumed my secrecy meant I was nothing but a penniless orphan they could exploit. For 4 long years, our marriage felt like a permanent test of my endurance, a test I was determined to pass to prove my father wrong. David climbed the corporate ladder at a major logistics firm, putting in long hours and coming home exhausted. I felt proud of him, deeply unaware of the ultimate irony. The logistics firm he worked for was actually a minor, distant subsidiary of Vance Global Enterprises. He had no idea his paychecks were ultimately funded by the man who had disowned me. Because we were trying to build a life on our own, I poured every ounce of my energy into supporting his dreams. I became the ultimate giver, while David and his family became insatiable takers. When David was drowning under $45,000 of predatory student loans, I didn't hesitate. I used every single penny of my personal savings, money I had earned entirely on my own through grueling freelance graphic design contracts, to wipe his slate clean. When his younger sister Chloe couldn't afford her tuition at State University, I sold my own reliable sedan and took the bus to work every day, just to hand over $28,000 to keep her in school. I never complained. I thought that's what family did. But the more I gave, the less they respected me. David's mother, Beatrice, and Chloe treated me like a second-class citizen who had hit the jackpot by marrying into their family. They constantly made snide remarks about my thrift store clothes, my faded shoes, and my lack of a family background. Beatrice would loudly wonder at Thanksgiving dinner why David hadn't married a girl from a respectable, established family instead of a quiet girl with no lineage. I swallowed my pride and stayed silent, reminding myself that love required sacrifice. But everything changed 6 months ago. Chloe was visiting our apartment to use my printer, and while searching through my closet for extra paper, she stumbled upon the small velvet box hidden beneath my winter sweaters. She opened it, and her jaw dropped. There it was, my mother's custom-cut sapphire ring catching the dim bedroom light with an undeniable, mesmerizing brilliance. When she demanded to know what it was, I told her it was a family heirloom from my late mother. I didn't mention its $150,000 price tag, but Chloe had an eye for luxury. From that exact moment, a toxic, suffocating jealousy took hold of her. Every Sunday dinner at Beatrice's house became a psychological battlefield. Chloe would make passive-aggressive comments about how a plain, ordinary girl like me had no business owning something so breathtaking. She would drop hints about how a ring like that belonged on someone who actually had a social life, someone who knew how to dress, someone like her. David began dropping hints, too, casually suggesting that we should sell it to buy a house or let Chloe borrow it for special events. I held my ground. That ring was my mother's soul, and it was the one boundary I refused to let them cross. The toxic undercurrent in the Miller family finally boiled over on the day of Chloe's lavish wedding. By this time, I was 7 months pregnant with our first child, a little boy. My body ached constantly, my feet were swollen, and the sheer exhaustion of carrying a new life while working 60 hours a week was catching up to me. Despite my condition, Beatrice and Chloe treated me like unpaid help for the wedding preparations. I spent the entire morning hauling heavy floral arrangements, organizing catering platters, and running frantic errands in the humid heat while Chloe sat in her bridal suite getting her makeup done. As I walked past the dressing room doors to grab another box of decorations, I froze. Through the cracked door, I saw Chloe dressed in her expensive white gown, tears streaming down her face, aggressively whispering into David's ear. She was gripping his arm, pointing frantically at her own hand. "David, it's my special day, and my outfit is completely ruined without the perfect something blue," she whined, her voice dripping with manipulative venom. "Elena has that stunning sapphire ring just sitting in a dark box doing absolutely nothing. She's a nobody who sits at home all day. She doesn't appreciate luxury. If she actually cared about this family, she would have offered it to me. Make her give it to me, David. Please, it's the only thing that will make this wedding perfect." David rubbed his face, looking stressed, but nodded slowly. "Don't worry, Chloe. I'll handle it. She owes us anyway." A cold pit formed in my stomach, but I kept my distance, hoping against hope that David would have the decency to respect my boundaries. I was wrong. An hour later, we pulled into the crowded parking lot of St. Jude's Country Club. The venue was bustling with activity. Luxury cars were pulling into spaces all around us, elegant guests were walking toward the main entrance, and the faint, romantic echo of the wedding music was already playing from the grand ballroom. The moment David shifted the car into park, he didn't unlock the doors. He turned around in his seat, his eyes cold and demanding. "Hand it over, Elena," he said, extending his palm. I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Hand what over, David?" "Don't play dumb. Chloe's sapphire ring. She needs it for the ceremony. I know you brought it in your purse because Beatrice told you to bring your valuables. Give it to me." "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I've told you 100 times, David. This ring belonged to my late mother. It is the only physical piece of her memory I have left in this world. I am not letting anyone else wear it, especially not today." The second the word "no" left my mouth, David's face twisted into an unrecognizable, monstrous rage. He didn't see a pregnant wife who had sacrificed her entire youth and savings for his family. He saw an obstacle. "You selfish, ungrateful bitch," he roared, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. He unlocked the doors, stormed out of the car, and threw my passenger side door open. Before I could even process what was happening, he lunged into the vehicle, grabbed my purse, dumped the contents onto the seat, and seized the small velvet box. Panic overtook me. I scrambled out of the car, gasping for air, trying to grab the box from his hands. "David, please, stop. Don't do this. Get off me," he screamed. As I reached out, his arm swung back. With total calculated malice, he launched his foot forward, kicking me directly and violently into my 7-month pregnant belly. Agonizing, white-hot pain exploded through my entire lower body. The force of the blow threw me backward. My spine slammed against the open metal car door before I collapsed heavily onto the hard, unforgiving pavement of the parking lot. I let out a choked, breathless scream, curling into a fetal position as the world spun. Seconds later, a warm, terrifying rush of liquid ran down my legs. My water had broken. Terrified, shaking, and gasping for air, I looked down through a blur of tears. My white maternity dress was rapidly soaking through with bright, terrifying streaks of blood. The physical pain was a monstrous wave ripping through my core, but the emotional shock was worse. I looked up from the hard asphalt. Chloe stood just a few feet away, clutching her bridal bouquet. She wasn't horrified. She wasn't rushing to call an ambulance. Instead, she was looking down at me with an icy, indifferent sneer, her fingers eagerly reaching out as David handed her my mother's sapphire ring. David stood frozen for a fraction of a second, staring at the blood on the pavement, but his expression quickly hardened into cold disgust. "Stop drama queening, Elena," he muttered, slipping his hands into his pockets. "You stumbled. Don't ruin my sister's day with your hysterics. We're going inside." They turned their backs on me. Nearby, a few arriving wedding guests stopped and stared in whispered confusion, but no one moved to help. They just saw a discarded, weeping girl on the ground. In that exact moment, as the wet pavement chilled my skin and my baby fought for life inside me, something inside my soul died, and something else was born. The crying stopped instantly. The desperate, suffocating desire I had carried for 7 years, the need to please David, to fit into his toxic family, to prove to the world that love could conquer everything, vanished into thin air. A freezing, blinding clarity took its place. Kindness had almost gotten me and my unborn child killed. Humility was a luxury I could no longer afford. With trembling, bloody fingers, I reached into my spilled purse on the asphalt and pulled out my phone. I didn't dial 911 first. I dialed a private, deeply encrypted emergency number that I had kept memorized in the darkest corners of my mind for 7 long years. The line didn't even ring twice. It picked up instantly. "Father," I whispered, my voice cracking but laced with an icy resolve he hadn't heard from me since I was a teenager. "It's Elena. I am at the St. Jude's Country Club parking lot. David just kicked me in the stomach. I'm bleeding, Father. Please." On the other end of the line, the heavy, calculated silence of Arthur Vance, the man who commanded empires and shattered corporate giants with a single word, broke completely. I heard the sharp, terrifying intake of his breath. "I am 20 minutes away," my father replied, his voice a low, rumbling thunder that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Hold on, my beautiful girl. Daddy is coming." Exactly 20 minutes later, the faint sound of wedding music inside the venue was completely drowned out by a deafening, mechanical roar. A private medical helicopter, bearing the sleek silver logo of Vance Enterprises, descended from the sky, landing directly on the manicured fairway of the adjacent golf course. Simultaneously, 3 heavy, blacked-out luxury SUVs tore into the country club parking lot, tires screeching as they aggressively blocked the main entrance. My father, Arthur Vance, stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was flanked by 6 towering private security guards, his face a mask of absolute murderous fury. Within seconds, the helicopter's trauma medics swarmed the asphalt, stabilizing me, lifting me onto a stretcher, and preparing me for immediate transport to my father's private medical wing in the city. As they hoisted my stretcher toward the sky, I reached out and grabbed my father's sleeve. "Take everything from them. I whispered through the oxygen mask. My father looked down at me, his eyes softening for a brief second before turning to ice. They will beg for a swift end before I am finished, Elena. Protect my grandson. I will handle the monsters. While I spent the next 72 hours in a state-of-the-art medical suite, undergoing an emergency delivery, and holding my beautiful, premature but healthy baby boy, Leo, my father unleashed a corporate and financial holocaust on the Miller family. Phase 1 began at precisely 9 a.m. on Monday morning. David walked into the logistics firm where he worked, completely oblivious, fully expecting a promotion he had been bragging about for weeks. Instead, he was called into the grand boardroom. Sitting at the head of the table was not his regional manager, but Arthur Vance's chief legal counsel. Over the weekend, Vance Global had quietly finalized a hostile takeover of the entire logistics conglomerate. David Miller, the lead attorney, announced, sliding a thick manila folder across the mahogany table. You are terminated effective immediately. Furthermore, Vance Global is freezing your corporate accounts, canceling your pending stock options, and placing your name on a global financial industry blacklist. You will never manage so much as a cash register in this country again. David sat there, his mouth hanging open, drowning in a sudden, terrifying realization as security escorted him out of the building. Phase 2 hit Chloe next. The $28,000 I had handed over for her college tuition had been carefully structured through my private account. My lawyers immediately filed a breach of agreement lawsuit, legally converting the gift into a predatory interest personal loan with a demand for immediate, full repayment. To make matters worse, the beautiful country club venue Chloe had rented for her reception sat on land owned by a real estate subsidiary of Vance Global. Midway through her post-wedding brunch, city code inspectors, backed by an army of Vance attorneys, marched in and shut the entire facility down due to a sudden, unfixable, structural zoning violation. Her dream wedding ended in a chaotic, humiliating eviction. Finally, Phase 3 landed. My father's legal team bypassed the local police department and went straight to the state prosecutor, filing felony aggravated assault on a pregnant woman and grand larceny charges against David for the theft of the $150,000 sapphire ring. 2 weeks later, I walked into the county precinct. My body was still healing, but I walked with my head held high, dressed in a tailored charcoal silk suit that belonged to the woman I used to be. Flanking me were 4 of the highest-paid defense attorneys in the country, and right beside me was my father. David was brought out into the visitation room in handcuffs. He looked utterly unrecognizable, unshaven, trembling, his expensive wedding suit replaced by an oversized orange jumpsuit. He was facing a 10-year mandatory prison sentence with no possibility of bail, thanks to the mountain of evidence my father's security team had pulled from the parking lot cameras. In the lobby outside, Beatrice and Chloe were huddled on a hard plastic bench, weeping, drowning in sudden debt, and begging the desk sergeant to let them speak to the powerful CEO who was systematically dismantling their lives. The moment David saw me, he slammed his hands against the glass partition. "Elena, please," he sobbed, tears tracking through the grime on his face. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know who your father was. I love you, Elena. Think about our son. Tell your father to drop the charges." I looked at him through the glass. My heart didn't flutter. I didn't feel a single shred of pity. I just felt a profound, echoing emptiness. "You didn't care about our son when you kicked me on the asphalt, David," I said, my voice deadpan and steady through the intercom. "And you didn't love me. You loved what you thought you could take from me." Behind me, a police property clerk stepped forward, carrying a clear evidence bag. Inside it was my mother's custom-cut sapphire ring. Chloe had been forced to surrender it the moment the grand larceny warrant was issued, her fingers shaking as the police stripped it from her hand. The clerk handed the bag to me. I broke the seal, took the ring out, and slid it back onto my finger where it belonged. Chloe and Beatrice watched through the lobby glass, their faces paralyzed in sheer, horrific realization. They finally understood that the quiet, penniless girl they had spent years abusing and mocking was the crown jewel of the very empire that now held their futures in a vice grip. David begged and wept as the guards dragged him back toward his cell, his screams fading down the concrete hallway. I didn't look back. I turned my back on the Miller name, on the lies, and on the manipulation forever. Today, I sit in a sunlit, secure nursery on my father's private estate, gently rocking my healthy baby boy, Leo, to sleep. The sapphire ring catches the morning light, gleaming with a brilliant, unbroken fire. I lost a husband, and I lost the naive illusion that everyone deserves forgiveness. But I regained my father, I secured my son's future, and I found my own iron will. The world will look at me and see a Vance, and no one will ever mistake my kindness for weakness again.